Imagine trusting someone with your life, only for them to destroy it in the most horrific way imaginable. Kimberly Proctor thought she was hanging out with friends, but what awaited her that day was a nightmare no one could have ever seen coming. This isn't just another tragic story, it's the kind of horror that makes even the toughest crime investigators break down. And what these two monsters did to her? It will haunt you. Stay tuned. Kimberly Proctor was an 18-year-old girl with dreams, hopes, and a world of potential ahead of her. But life wasn't easy for Kimberly. She stood out, not for her talents or achievements, but because of how different she was. Her deep love for animals made her an easy target for ridicule. She adored them: hamsters, lizards, cats, anything that moved. They were her sanctuary, her quiet escape. But when you're different, especially in high school, those differences often make you a target. The laughter, the cruel words, the whispers behind her back. Every day, Kimberly walked through the halls of her school, hoping the bullying would end. She wasn't like everyone else, and for that, she paid a price. Every smile she gave was met with meows, and every attempt to make a friend was met with ridicule. She had this unique way of looking at the world, a quiet kind of mystery. But what did it really mean to fit in? And as the days passed, her hopes of connecting, of finding peace grew weaker. Her love for animals, her quirky personality, those things only made her a target, not a friend. But Kimberly wanted something more than isolation. She wanted friendship. She wanted acceptance. But what Kimberly didn't know was that everything was about to change. She had met Cruz and Cam through mutual friends, two classmates she had hoped would be different. They seemed nice at first, funny, charming. Maybe this time it would work out. They invited her to hang out, a simple meeting, a chance for something new. She agreed. For the first time in a while, Kimberly felt like she might actually belong somewhere. But what Kimberly thought would be a simple day out turned into a nightmare she could never escape from. As we dive deeper into this story, there's a powerful lesson we can all learn, something that could protect your loved ones and potentially save a life. Stay with me, and I promise you, the lesson at the end of this journey will be worth it. If you believe everyone deserves a chance to live without fear, hit that subscribe button. Only those who stand with cruelty will skip this story. Kimberly had always believed that maybe just once she could trust someone. When Cruz and Cam showed interest in her, at first it felt like the beginning of something good. Cruz was the first to reach out. He was different from the others. He seemed kind, understanding. He offered her support in a way that felt genuine. Kimberly, starved for kindness after years of cruelty, couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. She thought, maybe this is it. Maybe I've finally found the friends I've been looking for. But little by little, things began to shift. Cruz started acting differently, like his attention was conditional, depending on how much Kimberly reciprocated. The same boy who had been warm and supportive now seemed distant, unpredictable. At first it was subtle. Text messages that came later than usual, weird, cryptic comments. Then the tone of his messages changed. They became demanding. One night after a late-night conversation, Cruz sent Kimberly a text that felt odd. "I'm sorry for what happened today, but you know I need to protect my boys. Don't tell anyone about this." It was strange. Kimberly had no idea what he meant, but she didn't ask. She brushed it off, thinking it was just a misunderstanding. But the next day, it got worse. Cruz and Cam together began sending her messages that felt more like threats. "If you don't come over, we'll just have to do it without you." They weren't asking anymore. They were telling her what to do. Kimberly felt it, deep in her gut. The trust she thought she'd found was slipping away. The more she looked at their words, the more their true intentions became clear. The games, the manipulation, it was all starting to add up. But what Kimberly never expected was that the very friends she trusted would take her life in a twisted game of manipulation. If you think friendship should never turn into betrayal, like this video, let's show these manipulators they can't hide the truth. Cruz and Cam were more than just classmates. They were like two sides of the same twisted coin. Their friendship, if you could call it that, was built on shared darkness. a mutual interest in violence, and a strange admiration for each other's dangerous tendencies. From the outside, they were just normal teenagers. But beneath the surface, they were obsessed with things that made most people cringe. Cruz had always been the one to push things further. His fascination with violence wasn't a phase. It was a way of life. At first, he kept his darker thoughts to himself, but over time, he started sharing them with Cam, seeing in him a partner who would push him further into his fantasies. It started with small things, conversations about destruction, cruelty, and what it would feel like to actually hurt someone. Ever think about what it'd be like to hurt someone just to see their reaction? Cruz had asked Cam one day, the question hanging in the air between them, a dangerous curiosity. Cam, always the one to go along with Cruz, laughed, dismissing it as just talk. But Cruz didn't let it go. He kept pushing, probing deeper into his mind, stirring up dark fantasies that neither of them had any business entertaining. As the days went on, it was clear that Cruz was the ringleader. He was the one with the sick ideas, the twisted vision. Cam, despite his own issues, seemed almost like a follower, someone who was caught up in Cruz's dangerous game. But the more Cruz spoke, the more his true nature began to surface. He didn't just want to hurt someone. He wanted control. He wanted power. He didn't talk about people like they were human. To him, they were just objects to be manipulated, destroyed, used for his amusement. And it wasn't long before those thoughts turned into something more concrete, something that would lead to Kimberly. It was then, in a small moment, that Cruz's true intentions became clear. He had no remorse, no empathy. He looked at people, even those close to him, like they were nothing more than tools to be discarded. Cruz wasn't just a troubled teen, he was becoming a predator. Do you believe that true monsters should never escape justice? Share this video, let's spread the word and make sure they never forget what they did. It started innocently enough, or so it seemed. A message from Cruz to Kimberly, one of many they'd exchanged over time. At first, there was nothing out of the ordinary, just the usual chatter between two people who thought they were friends. But with each message, Cruz's tone began to shift. "Hey, you good?" he asked, as if everything was normal. Kimberly, unaware of the trap being set, replied with her usual warmth. "Yeah, just hanging out. What about you?" Cruz didn't answer immediately. Instead, he let the silence linger, like he was savoring something, biding his time. It was then that he sent the next message, a strange one. At first glance, it seemed harmless, a question like any other. But the words hung in the air, cold and foreboding. "Don't worry, I'm just here with Cam. We're thinking about what to do next, but it's up to you." Kimberly didn't think twice. She didn't sense the danger lurking behind the words, not yet. But that was the beginning of something much darker. Cruz had already made his move, and now it was just a matter of time before Kimberly would realize what was happening. What she didn't know was that Cruz and Cam had been working in tandem, manipulating her emotions, stringing her along with false promises of friendship. She was completely unaware that their plan was already in motion, that what they were planning wasn't just a prank, but something far more sinister. Each message Cruz sent her was a piece of the puzzle, a clue that she would never fully understand in time. As Kimberly went about her day, she had no idea that the text she received from Cruz would be the last warning she'd ever get. And in that chilling moment, when she finally realized the gravity of what was happening, it would already be too late. The text Cruz sent Kimberly was just the beginning, a warning she would never understand in time. Now, as you hear these chilling messages between Cruz and Cam, you may think, how could someone fall victim to something like this? Well, here's the first thing you can learn right now. Trust your instincts. Kimberly, despite the red flags, still trusted her friends and went to meet them. This is where a lot of people go wrong. They don't trust their gut. Always trust that feeling when something doesn't seem right. Keep watching, because as we continue, I'll reveal how this lesson alone could help keep your loved ones safe. If you're not siding with these twisted manipulators, comment, "I believe in justice." I read and replied to every comment. Let's stand up for the victims. It was supposed to be just another day. Kimberly, eager for a chance to feel normal again, agreed to meet up with Cruz and Cam at Cruz's house. She thought it would be a simple hangout, just like the countless others they'd had in the past. Her heart still raw from her recent breakup, but hopeful for some distraction. She arrived at Cruz's house, greeted by the usual casual smiles. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. They had planned to just relax, talk, maybe watch a movie. Kimberly, vulnerable and trusting, let her guard down. She felt safe for the first time in weeks. These were her friends, right? But Cruz and Cam didn't see it that way. They saw this as the perfect opportunity, an unspoken plan already set in motion. As Kimberly sat down, the three of them talked about everything: school, life, the usual teenage chatter. But there was something off about the way Cruz was acting. Something rehearsed. Then, without missing a beat, Cruz casually said it. "I'm going to make some KD." Kimberly didn't catch the significance, of course. To her, it was just another random thing to say. She didn't know that it was the code, the signal. But for Cruz and Cam, that phrase was everything. It was the green light, the moment when the plan they had meticulously set up would begin. Kimberly didn't realize that the house she thought was safe was, in fact, a trap. Her trust in them, her belief that they were friends, was about to be shattered in the worst way possible. She didn't know that everything was about to change. The calmness, the friendliness, the normalcy, it was all a facade. What happened next was so much darker than anything she could have imagined. As the door to the kitchen closed behind Cruz, Kimberly felt a sudden chill. Her intuition whispered something was wrong, but it was too late. She was already in too deep. The monsters she had trusted had already prepared for this moment. If you think Kimberly deserves justice, hit that subscribe button. Only the indifferent won't subscribe to her story. Kimberly had no idea what she had walked into. She trusted them. She thought they were friends, but all that was about to change. Once the door to the kitchen clicked shut behind Cruz, the room felt colder. What Kimberly didn't realize was that the trap was now set. In those quiet, fleeting moments, her gut twisted with unease, but it was too late for second thoughts. As Cruz approached her, his face shifted into something darker. There was no warmth in his eyes, no glimmer of the friend she once knew. "Come on, let's just hang out," he said, his voice a little too calm. But Kimberly could sense the change. But even in her confusion, even in the back of her mind, where a warning bell rang louder now, she never saw it coming. They attacked without mercy, no hesitation, no remorse. They restrained her, pinning her down. Kimberly fought, kicking, screaming, desperate for a way out. But it was no use. The world around her became nothing but a blur of panic and pain. Her cries, desperate pleas for help, were silenced by the suffocating darkness of their intentions. The cruelty behind their actions became undeniable with every passing second. There was no empathy, no second thoughts, just two boys full of malice, taking what they wanted. And as the horror unfolded, what was even more chilling was what happened next. In the moments after the attack, while Kimberly was left fighting for her life, Cruz and Cam did what every twisted mind would. They texted each other. Cruz's phone buzzed. He'd sent a message to Cam, no apology, no remorse, just details. "Already saw this on the news." "Yeah, I know, just funny how it all worked out." The casual tone, the lack of emotion, it was enough to make anyone's blood run cold. They weren't just monstrous in their actions. They were monsters in their hearts, too. They didn't even care. They reveled in what they'd done. But this wasn't just another twisted act. It was the beginning of a twisted plan that would shake the entire community to its core. If you can't tolerate what Cruz and Cam did to Kimberly, like this video. Only the monsters wouldn't support the truth. The day after Kimberly went missing, the search for her seemed endless. But that search ended in the most horrific way possible. It wasn't the police who made the discovery. It wasn't volunteers or a family member out looking for answers. No, it was a group of young boys just out for a quiet spot, a place to escape the noise of their lives. The Galloping Goose Bridge, secluded, isolated, an unlikely location for anyone to be. And yet, it was here that fate would take its cruel turn. The boys arrived, expecting nothing more than some peace, just a quiet place to talk, to clear their minds. But what they found sent shockwaves through their entire community. As one of them stepped toward the edge, a sight too chilling to describe unfolded before their eyes. At first, they couldn't even comprehend what they were seeing. The body, so pale, so still, twisted in a way no one should ever have to witness. The horror they saw would stay with them for the rest of their lives. The police arrived minutes later, and as they confirmed the identity, the reality sank in. Kimberly Proctor, her young, vibrant life snuffed out, leaving only the echo of a nightmare. What was left behind by Cruz and Cam wasn't just a body. It was a message, raw, chilling, and full of malice. But the worst was yet to come. Investigators began piecing together the grim details of what had happened to her. And what they uncovered was more than just an act of violence. It was an act of pure hatred. Kimberly's body had been left in a way that was almost too difficult to comprehend. No respect, no remorse. The actions that followed were worse than anyone could have imagined. The two boys had gone to extreme lengths to try and cover their tracks, and to make sure the evidence would never surface. But they didn't count on one thing: people who cared. People who wouldn't let them get away with it. As we look at how Kimberly's body was discovered, by chance in a remote area, there's a lesson here that everyone should understand. Location and communication are key. Kimberly's family had set expectations on communication and safety, but it's clear that we must always make sure our loved ones know where they are and who they are with, especially when danger is lurking. Keep watching, because the complete set of lessons will empower you to prevent this kind of tragedy from happening to your family. If you believe people like Cruz and Cam should never walk free again, share this video. The world deserves to know the truth. The police were in a race against time. With Kimberly's body discovered and the shock of the crime still reverberating through the community, investigators began their methodical work. They knew this wasn't going to be an ordinary case. The brutality of the act, the chilling nature of what had been done to Kimberly, it couldn't just be a random crime. They had to dig deeper. And so, they did. The first step was the forensic analysis. Detectives scoured the scene, looking for anything that could lead them to answers. It didn't take long to find something chilling. Among the clues that were starting to pile up, the digital trail was the key. The internet, the modern-day confession booth, every message, every post, a potential breadcrumb leading them closer to the killers. Investigators began going through Kimberly's phone records, her social media accounts, anything that might provide insight into her final moments. It wasn't long before they started focusing on Cruz and Cam. The pieces were starting to fall into place. There it was, a message from Cruz sent during the time of the attack. It was to a friend, casual, as if nothing was wrong at all. "Sorry, the freezer is bouncing." Those words, so flippant, so nonchalant, sent a shiver down the spine of the entire investigation team. What could be worse than that? It was an admission, right there in the most sickeningly subtle way, a clue that showed just how far Cruz had fallen into his own depravity. Cruz wasn't just a passive participant. He wasn't just an accessory to the crime. No, he was the one who made sure there was no escape, the one who thought it was all some sick joke. But what the investigators didn't know yet was just how deeply this web of lies went. They were still digging and still searching through the digital trail that would lead them right to the core of the twisted minds behind the crime. Comment, "I demand justice," if you're standing against these criminals. I read and reply to every comment. Let's make sure their story is told. The courtroom was silent as the tension filled the air. The final chapter in the case of Kimberly Proctor was about to unfold. The families of the victims, and even those involved in the investigation, had been waiting for this day. The truth, everything that had been built up in the investigation, would now be tested in a public trial. The world would see how the justice system would handle this unimaginable crime. Kimberly's family sat in the front row, their faces a mixture of grief and anger as they stared at the two young men who had taken their daughter from them. But the most haunting part of all? Cruz and Cam showed no signs of remorse. As the trial progressed, the prosecution and defense went head-to-head, each side presenting their case. The defense team sought to paint Cruz and Cam as mentally unstable, struggling with their past, their environment, their upbringing. They argued that both were victims in their own right, scarred by childhood trauma, by neglect, and by the lack of support they needed to live normal lives. But the prosecution wasn't buying it. They fought back with a simple truth. These were two young men who had made a choice, who had taken the life of an innocent girl in the most horrific way imaginable. Still, the psychiatric evaluations seemed to support the defense's argument. Cruz and Cam were deeply disturbed, psychopaths even. But did that mean they were insane? Could they be absolved of their actions because of their mental state? And what about Kimberly? What about her life? What about the promises she made to herself, the future she could have had? The courtroom began to feel the weight of that question. As the defense lawyer continued to speak, he presented the fact that Cruz and Cam showed signs of mental instability. But the question remained, were they criminally insane? Could their actions be explained away by their lack of mental capacity? But as the trial continued, the killer's lack of remorse became painfully clear. Cruz sitting there, staring ahead, his face empty. Cam whispering with a slight smirk. The prosecution revealed something chilling, something that would shock the entire courtroom. In an attempt to make a deal with investigators, Cruz and Cam had confessed, but their words were without guilt. They didn't beg for forgiveness. They didn't seem to care at all about the life they took. And in the end, the jury's decision would decide if these two would ever be allowed to walk free or if they'd spend the rest of their lives in prison. If you believe that no one should get away with such horrors, subscribe now. Only those who want justice will stand with us. Bologna. The courtroom fell into a tense silence as the judge stood up, preparing to deliver the final verdict. Kimberly's family, their eyes red from the tears that had never stopped, sat in the front row, gripping each other's hands. This was it, the moment they had been waiting for, the moment that could, for some, finally bring a sliver of peace. But there would be no true peace. Not for them, not for anyone who had known Kimberly. As the judge spoke, the weight of his words seemed to hang in the air. The defendants, Cruz Wellwood and Cameron Moffat, are hereby sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for at least 10 years. For a moment, everything felt still, frozen. Kimberly's parents sat motionless, not smiling, but not weeping either. There was no relief in this decision. There would never be enough justice. No sentence could bring their daughter back. The courtroom buzzed with a mixture of emotions, some quiet, some not. People whispered, some relieved, others furious at the thought of these two ever having a chance at freedom. But the truth, the painful truth, was that this sentence couldn't undo the horror they had caused. Life in prison, 10 years before they could even think of getting out. But what did that even mean? 10 years? 10 years for what they did? It felt like a slap in the face, an insult to Kimberly's life, to her family's suffering. As the judge banged the gavel and the courtroom emptied, Kimberly's family was left with the echoes of what had happened, haunted by the knowledge that Cruz and Cam would one day be free, perhaps even to hurt someone else. As we come to the conclusion of this heart-wrenching story, let me break down the most crucial lessons we can all learn from Kimberly's tragic fate. These lessons aren't just for parents. They're for anyone who cares about their loved one's safety. Lesson 5, the power of communication. The most basic yet essential lesson, always know where your loved ones are and who they are with. Kimberly's family always checked in, but communication wasn't enough. She needed to be more aware of the dangers surrounding her, and her family needed to reinforce safety checks at every step. Whether it's knowing the location of your children or your loved one's friends, communication is a two-way street. Lesson 4, trust your instincts. We've seen it over and over again. People ignore gut feelings. Kimberly felt the red flags, strange messages, weird vibes, but still trusted her so-called friends. Your instincts are your first line of defense. Teach your loved ones to listen to their gut and take precautions when something feels off. Never let someone talk you out of your own fears. Lesson 3, Understanding warning signs of manipulation. Cruz and Cam's manipulation of Kimberly was chilling. Recognizing the subtle signs of manipulation early on is crucial. Whether it's someone pushing boundaries, isolating you from others, or trying to control your decisions, manipulation starts small but can quickly escalate into something dangerous. Empower yourself and your loved ones to spot and avoid these kinds of relationships. Lesson 2. The importance of friendships and choosing the right people. The friends we keep can shape our lives in ways we never expect. Kimberly was seeking belonging, but her friends had sinister motives. Surround yourself with trustworthy, reliable people. The ones who support you, not use you for their twisted desires. Teach your loved ones the value of surrounding themselves with healthy, trustworthy people. Lesson 1. Setting boundaries and being assertive. No one should ever feel pressured into doing something they're uncomfortable with, especially in dangerous situations. Kimberly struggled to assert her boundaries with Cruz and Cam, and that cost her dearly. Teach your loved ones to be assertive and set boundaries, especially when something doesn't feel right. And if someone's pushing too hard, walk away. By understanding these lessons and knowing what happened here, you can take control of your own family's safety. So what should you do next? Have those tough conversations. Know where your loved ones are. Teach them how to trust their instincts. And most importantly, be the protector they need. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you think these lessons would have made a difference in Kimberly's story? Comment below and share your thoughts. And don't forget, subscribe for more stories like this. Stay safe, and remember, it only takes one person to make a difference. It could be you. Thank you for staying with us through this horrific journey. If you think the killers got what they deserved, please hit that subscribe button. If you learned something valuable from this story, like this video and share it with your friends and family. It's time we start having these conversations and making safety a priority. What lessons do you think we can all learn from this? Comment below. I read and replied to every comment, and I appreciate all your thoughts. Don't forget to share this video and watch our other videos for more stories like this. The best way to protect those we love is to stay informed, and we've got plenty more to share with you. Stay safe out there, and we'll see you in the next video.